an Undertow Content podcast.
Undertow Content acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people Australia-wide. You're listening to Cut, the podcast where we deep dive into the many facets of the entertainment industry, both locally and internationally.
We're bringing you unfiltered stories and raw insights with no gatekeeping.
From Undertow Content, we're your hosts, Amanda Brown
and Nell,
and it's our very first show. Hooray!
Yay!
We are so excited, and thank you to all of those who are listening. Mum, yep, love you. Thanks so much.
Before we dive into our first expert conversation with the brilliant Deb Jourdain, let's start with In the News, where we unpack a topic that is being talked about in the trades and amongst people in the industry.
Today's topic is remakes. God, I love a good remake.
Oh, and I hate a bad one. Remakes have always been a thing, though. This year we saw Twisters come out with Glenn Powell and Daisy Edgar Jones, The Crow remake with Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs, plus a bunch more over the years, including Carrie, Man on Fire, The Parent Trap, Mean Girls, Ocean's 11, and Finn Wolfhard just announced he wants to remake Idle Hands, which originally starred Jessica Alba, Seth Green, Vivica A. Fox. There are so many.
So many. Now, I don't know if it's just me or does it feel like there are a lot of remakes being produced at the moment. Like, I feel like there's so many of them at the moment.
Yeah, there definitely are. And there is a reason for it. It's because it's IP with an already established audience.
I think that's it. It's like everyone's quite risk averse at the moment. So if there's something, if you can fund something or if you can make something that already has an audience, how amazing is that? So according to an article published in The Hollywood Reporter in March 2023 titled, "Do We Really Need or Even Want a Remake of Vertigo?" I know. Author Owen Gleiberman expresses the following with regards to the announcement that Paramount is going to remake the iconic Alfred Hitchcock film with Robert Downey Jr. attached. Oof. I know. A remake of Vertigo would theoretically be a good movie, but I wouldn't bet on it. I'm not alone in thinking that it sounds like a very bad idea. Not because the film will necessarily be a travesty, but because of the idea behind the idea. What does it mean when the entire golden age of Hollywood gets reduced to IP?
Yes.
If they can do it to Vertigo, they can do it to anything, and that's a travesty. I think there would be a lot of people who would agree with that, but a couple more recent articles published by The Hollywood Reporter at the beginning of 2024 give a good indication of where the industry is at and that remakes are actually not going anywhere.
An article in March by Scott Roxburgh announced that Cannes is getting into the remake business, stating that the Cannes film market, you pronounce this?
The Marche du Film. It's probably wrong, but...
is launching a one-day event focused entirely on remakes and local language adaptations of existing titles.
A follow-up article at the close of the Cannes Film Festival this year by Scott, again, for The Hollywood Reporter, was published in May of this year, stating, alongside the hundreds of original movies being shopped up and down the Croisette, is that how you...
Croisette? Who knows?
I don't... Oh, God, I need to check this first. During the Cannes Marche du Film, the market for remakes, local language adaptations of established hits, is quietly booming. We're not only talking about the international to English remakes such as Oscar winner Coda, an adaptation of 2014 French language dramedy La Famille Bélier, I did not say that right, or Chris Rock's planned US take on Thomas Vinterberg's 2020 Danish Oscar winner Another Round. International to international remakes are, if anything, an even bigger business.
Yep.
Jia Ling's Chinese blockbuster YOLO, which has grossed $479 million.
Wow.
Yeah, $479 million. That's insane.
Yeah.
Is a remake of the 2014 Japanese film 100 Yen Love. The Italian couple's comedy drama Perfect Strangers from 2016 has been spun off into more than 20 local language adaptations worldwide. I think it's clear that the remake market is alive and well.
Yep.
And it's not going anywhere, and it's actually even more, it's happening more so now than ever. But why is there such a strong focus on it now?
Okay, couple of thoughts. So it's a big money spinner. Nostalgia is actually really good for business.
Yeah,
as we said,
true.
It's established IP. Also with films like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? It's a chance for parents to introduce their kids to the world that they loved.
That's so
So
true.
it's like a win-win. It's a way for studios to play it safe in a market that's, you know, they're risk averse. So they're trying to edge their bets, which is good business, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is that remakes attract a lot of star power. So you think about The Lion King, the live action version.
Yeah.
Star-studded list, right? Of course they want to be involved in those things because, again, speaks to nostalgia. And that also is good for business because you've got all these massive names attached.
And I also think it's that proven IP, but it's something like The Lion King or, you know, The Mandalorian, or The Mandalorian isn't necessarily, you know, it's a different version, whatever. But, you know, the stuff that we're talking about here, especially when it comes to animation and VFX and all of that, the technology now is so different to when something like that was made. Like, we've talked about how Harry Potter is being made into a television series, which so excited. Yeah. Bit too soon, but so excited.
But I think you're right. That's when it changes it for the better because the technology elevates it.
Yeah, and the fact that it's now going from a feature film, you know, series format into a TV series, and the detail that can come into a TV series. But also, like, even the last film in the Harry Potter series, the tech now has advanced even from then.
And even like Jurassic Park, you think about the first one and then the last one, chalk and cheese in terms of like the effects.
Yeah. And I think all of that is really good, but it's also this, what does... you know, obviously there's not an endless pot of money to be able to fund things. What does making a remake mean for emerging creators, emerging storytellers, you know, emerging filmmakers? Does it stop opportunity for new voices, new stories, all of that kind of stuff?
Original IP.
Because the money's already going to established IP.
Yeah, it's a valid question.
I'm curious to see if it actually impacts it, because I don't think there's more money at the moment. There's less money.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and as we've talked about, the studios are risk averse and people with money are risk averse. They want an almost surefire bet.
But then also maybe these remakes are providing more money to be able to make more stuff. So if the remakes were off the table, maybe it would just be less.
That's a really good point. I'm curious to hear what everybody thinks that's listening, because remakes, they're good, they're bad, whatever they are, but they're here to stay, obviously. And I love the fact that there's local language adapting. Because I think we've seen that happen with Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
And that's an opportunity too for that business mentality of IP, what we were speaking about with Julie on one of the episodes.
Yeah, it's true. I'm really curious to see what happens.
Yeah.
Love it. What's your favourite remake? Comment on our Instagram and let us know what your favourite remake is.
For our first expert segment, we wanted to find someone to chat to who we knew would be a wealth of information and would open the door to a different part of the industry that is really unknown to many. Deb Jourdain is an Aussie who is currently living and working in LA in production. As you'll hear, she started out as an actress, but soon figured out that what she loved and wanted to do was on the production side. She's had a really diverse career up until now, and we are really excited to share this interview with you. Here's Amanda's chat with Deb. So thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
What is it that you do, and what do you think people should know about what you do?
I work in physical production. My specific title is manager physical production, and we're an in-house team at a production company or a studio that oversees all of the actual production side of a movie or TV show. So once it's been developed, once the creative execs are happy with where the script's at, they will give it to us, and we are the team that are responsible for checking tax incentives, the best place to shoot it, the best crew, HODs, line producers to hire, all of those things that go into actually getting the project physically off the ground.
So you work with like the producers that are attached?
Yeah, we work really closely with the producers and pretty closely with the directors too, just in what they want for their vision alongside the producers, because sometimes they want different things, but sometimes they want the same things. But it's our job to basically get everyone on the same page for a number of things. Most importantly, the schedule and the budget. The two very important things that other people don't like to think about.
Where did you start? Like, what drew you to this industry?
I started once upon a time when I was a baby human, wanted to be an actor. wanted to be an actor, loved theater, loved all things creative in that sense, and very quickly realized I did not actually want to be an actor because as much as I loved it, I don't think I was prepared for the hustle lifestyle of it, and two, also started to realize that my strengths were on the other side of the camera. And my very first job, I worked for a television producer in Australia. Had no idea what a producer's assistant really was. I feel like they'd never teach you this in uni. They always you can be an editor, you can be a screenwriter, you can be a director. Actual practical jobs never really came up in my degree. I started working for this television producer and learned a lot. And that's kind of how I started. And this was in Australia. And then about 2 years into working for him, I won the green card lottery. So I was
dream.
very lucky to get an opportunity to then take what I'd learned to the United States.
So you're Australian, you won the green card, you came over to LA. So what's been your hardest challenge that you've had to overcome in your career?
I would say it's two main things. One, I'd say, honestly, the financial side of navigating the LA. It's very expensive here. I would say that the industry is relatively known for not having the biggest salaries, or maybe it's just more that there's such a discrepancy between each level.
You're overpaid until you're underpaid. You're underpaid until you're overpaid.
Correct, exactly. And obviously we saw those articles during the strikes and stuff. You see how much these CEOs of these companies make and you're like, this is crazy. But you know that my first assistant job out here, my very first job, I worked at a talent management company and I made $12 an hour. I mean, granted, this was 2014, but still, it's $12 an hour. And for context, when I was in university and working a casual job, I worked at a catering company at a stadium and I made $30 an hour. So, and that was with no skill set. So that's been hard to navigate. I'd also say climbing a ladder here can be hard. It's not always hard for everyone, but I do feel like there's so many of us that are working in this industry, being able to rise to a level where you have a bit more autonomy or are able to really use the skills that you have can take time. I guess in that, part of what my struggle has been was finding exactly part of the industry that I wanted to work in, because there's so many different things you can do out here. And it took me trying 4 or 5 of them to be oh yeah, I think this is the side that full-time wise makes the most sense for me.
Lots of people, they come out here thinking they're going to do one thing and then they end up actually doing something completely different.
Totally. And I think it's once again, it's you do not even realize how many jobs there are, different departments or parts of this industry that you can do that you'll enjoy the most, that you are the best at. I had no idea that there was so many different jobs you could do.
Well, and that's why it's cool to have you on the podcast, because I think there are a lot of people who don't know that physical production executives exist, or they don't know what they do, or why they're relevant, or anything. So it's cool to have you on here and kind of expose the physical production executive, because it's they're a crucial part of getting stuff made. And a lot of the time you don't work with the creatives so much, right?
We do, in a different sense. I will say that it depends on where you're at. When I've been at a bigger studio, we work with the creatives when they come on to make a thing, but we are just not very involved or updated on development status. At a smaller company, you are, because there's just a lot more meetings that happen, and you're just really across a lot more than at a studio where there's just bigger departments that you're the creatives specifically have their development meetings. But we work with them in a different sense. I think a big part of our job is, in a weird way, we're creative, but it's a different kind of creativity. It's if you have a budget and somebody wants a plane scene, and then you have to be this one scene is actually going to be very expensive.
Yeah.
So can we think of an alternative of where if this scene in particular is important but doesn't have to happen on the plane, can it happen here? It's the same when you start to realize that scripts that people will be writing and they'll be it's only a short scene, but that short scene, it doesn't matter how short it is, it's still, if it's a different location that you're not using for any other time, it's money that you're spending on a completely new location, that kind of thing. So I think it's just, we often have to work with them in that sense to make sure that they understand how to actually put their creative vision into an actual movie or a TV show with the amount of money that we have allocated to spend. That is definitely something that's like sometimes hard. Like some creative producers are very aware of it and some are less aware of it just because like that's not their job.
Yeah.
You know?
So you guys are like, well, that's expensive
Yeah,
and blows out the budget. Change.
It's funny because someone always like to say that like, they're like, you guys always want to say no. And I'm like, our job is not actually to say no. Our job is to figure out how to make what you want, but just in a way that fits into the plan that we have. If you're at a big studio, they might give you more money, but like the more money you're putting into the budget, the more money you have to recoup when it goes out. And so the less profit you make on something. So it's just all about how much money you can make at the end of once it's released.
A lot of creatives in particular, like the writers and the directors, especially in the emerging space, they don't know how the studios work. And especially if you don't work in LA or you don't, you're in Australia or another territory, you don't know how that process works. And it's really daunting. I know that there are a lot of people who are petrified to get screwed over.
Yeah. I mean, I get that, especially like, having worked in Australia is really lucky in its funding bodies. There are bodies for each state. There is a federal body like that will help provide funding for whatever you're making. If you're shooting something in Melbourne, you could look at Film Victoria. There's so many different avenues to help get your funding for that. Whereas out here, that's not really a thing. Like the only way you do that is when you go to shoot internationally and then you tap into international resources. But yeah, I can totally understand why it's hard here. I mean, look, the things that I always recommend to writers or directors coming out here, even if you're not a member, you should look into the resources that the unions can provide. I mean, it's funny because part of the physical production job really is tracking the union stuff because that's a big part of our job. Pretty much everyone we hire in certain departments will be DGA. The writers will almost always be WGA. Our actors will almost always be SAG, or at least every production will usually have that. It just depends. If you're shooting a full international production, then maybe not, but that's not usually what happens for what we're making. Yeah. So I think it's always worth tapping into whatever resources you can find online. But like, if you're not sure if you're a writer and you've been talking to a company, you should call the guild and you can check what you think is right and they will help you and they will make sure that you're getting the fairest deal. It's hard to say, but like trust your gut. Like make sure you get things in writing. Yep. Make sure that you trust who you're working with.
I always tell creatives, your first call should be a lawyer.
Totally.
An entertainment lawyer. It doesn't matter what stage you're at, you should be in contact with an entertainment lawyer.
Yeah.
And you should be checking with them anytime anyone tries to, you are doing a deal with anybody.
Yeah. And do a little bit of research on whoever the person is. If they're legit, you'll be able to find articles in them. Use Deadline, use Variety. Like you'll be able to find information.
IMDB Pro.
It truly.
And I was like, I don't need IMDb.
No, it's worth it. Do it. It's also a good marketing tool for you. Like it's worth it for so many reasons, but that is a very real point.
I always check IMDb Pro, and if they don't have one, I'm like, who are you?
Yeah.
I'm joking.
No, but it's true. Like, I mean, obviously not everyone has it, but it helps legitimize things. So it's worth it.
Does. So in terms of, like, you said that the funding bodies in Australia, we're really lucky to have them, and we are. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good and bad thing because we don't have private investment in Australia, which is, not cool, but we do have the funding bodies. But the thing is that a lot of our content is dictated by what the funding bodies want to fund, which is, it's taxpayer money. So, okay, we get it. But how does it work in America from what you know and what you can share?
Sort of depends where you are. If you're at a smaller company, like an independent company, a lot of the time they'll finance themselves. Like they basically have gotten them into a position where they like can finance a script or a film or a TV show themselves. TV shows, I'd say less because TV shows almost always need a network attached. So that's kind of different. That will come from a studio side or a network side. If you work at an independent company or a smaller production company, it will depend if you're able to finance.
Where is that money coming from for them? They're
usually investors. It'll come from different investors. Yeah, exactly. Or sales. Like it'll all be like sometimes they'll take a title. Like this is when you'll see a title that's like packaged, like you've attached an actor, you have a deal in place, you've attached a director, whatever it is, and you'll take it to a market and you'll try to sell it. And you'll have basically people want to buy territories and all of this comes into that. And then if depending on which company you're at, if you're at a financier, then you will be able to get your own backing into it. Obviously, that all comes with a bit of stuff. Things like you have a bond, you have a finance fee, so all things that take place in a budget. If you're at a studio, it's a little bit different because you still have money coming in, but you basically have an overhead. You'll have a certain amount of overhead that'll be allocated throughout a year maybe. It'll be like X amount of money to make movies, and that's how they'll kind of dictate, that's basically how they'll dictate a budget. I will say I think streaming is even more different, and I wouldn't say I really get all of that. Obviously it sort of depends on which streamer, and there's a lot of feeling that sometimes with streamers, because they'll be able to have a higher above the line in a budget, they're willing to invest more money from their overhead into talent, but it doesn't necessarily make the rest of the budget bigger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because most of your work's been in more the studios or the production company side, studio side, rather than streamers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, they obviously have a huge source of revenue. If you look at like an Amazon or an Apple, like that's not their main business, so they have a lot of revenue that comes in from other avenues, and there's different stakeholders. They manage their funds differently, I think.
What trends are you noticing in the industry?
You mean like for kind of material that people are looking for?
Material, the decision makers, what are they doing?
Yeah, something that I'm seeing that we've been talking about a lot is like the shift from theatrical to streaming and then back to theatrical, because I would say that I feel like theatrical's been pretty good this last year. Like there's really been some good movies that have come out and been released in theaters and had audiences. What I'm enjoying is the shift of movies that probably 2 or 3 years ago would have been considered streaming, then being released in theaters. I'm thinking like Anyone But You, Joyride, It Ends With Us, like all these movies that you would honestly think that they would go to streaming, but they were lucky enough to get a theatrical release, and it's really cool to see them thrive. I'm also, funnily enough, seeing a bit of a trend towards like material for Gen Z, which is really a very weird thing for a millennial to process. But it is like, that is a world where writers are starting to explore. It's like we saw it in Bottoms, we see it in Challengers even. There's a lot of those movies coming out, TV shows as well. I don't really look too much anymore about what networks and stuff are particularly looking for. I think each place is looking for something different, just depending on where you are. And like the crazy thing is like we just have so many places now, which is kind of amazing. So it really gives a chance that if you have a certain type of, obviously there's certain procedurals that will just always be well. I'm sure like medical shows will always be, like lawyer cop shows will always be popular because there's just a marketplace for them. Totally. There's
British
just
true crime. Classic.
there's just always an audience.
Yeah.
Guilty. I will watch those shows all the time. But yeah, in terms of actual genres that people are looking at, you know what we also have seen? There's a lot more horror. I feel like there's a lot of horror, which has been great, because the good thing about horror is you can have a low budget, you can cast lesser known people, all things that are really exciting from...
And people love it. Date
yes.
night.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm scared. Let's get close.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you know it's becoming big when like they're not just getting released at like Halloween.
Yeah.
When things are getting released throughout the year, you're like, this says a lot about what people are willing to do. But I think it's just that you can make more for less with those.
It's more low
and you're
budget.
pretty much always guaranteed to make your money back, which is what people care about.
You got to make money in order to keep making stuff. What's a film that's influenced you?
Well, you'll probably laugh because it's forever ago, but the film that made me be like, I must make films, I must do something like this, was The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Yes. I walked out of that movie and I was like, I need to be a part of something like this. Like, how does one be a part of something like this? And I bought all the books, the soundtrack. And when I say the books, I mean all the books that they make about the making of the movie. Everything. Yeah, I just really like locked into all of that. Then I saw the movie like 2 more times. And then I saw the next 2 movies 3 times. And I just, learning about how they basically spent like, 18 months on the set making all these, I was just like, what an incredible experience, and I want to be part of something like that. So I always reference that when people are like, what made you want to do this? And I'm like, that movie.
Yeah, I love it.
And it still holds up so well. I don't know, I just imagine stepping onto a set like that and just being wowed. Everyone who participated in that, like the talent they brought to that was incredible. It's like a phenomenon that I hope I'll get to be a part of. I don't know, but I think it was incredible. Oh, thank you.
How has the journey differed so far to what you expected or wanted?
It just took me longer than I wanted to really figure out like that physical production was a real job I could do, where I could really implement my organizational skills. I don't regret anything, so it's not like, that's definitely been a challenge. And then, you know, as you get older, you think about how you can balance all of this and your growth with the steps that come with as you get older. It's like you have more financial burdens. You think about if you're going to have children, like all of these things that come with like, how do you balance this like real life stuff with like this industry that is awesome and you want to be a part of, but that is very consuming. And like, that is a very real thing. Like, this industry is all consuming. Even out here, it like took a while to find. I have such great friends, but like, I wanted a community outside of the entertainment community as well. And like, I'm glad I have it, but it's hard because everyone's always working and like people are always hustling, and it's like both very cool because you know that that's kind of what you have in you, but it's also like very tiring at times, and you hope that it will pay off one day. And you see people really go far and make it far, and then you see people who stop wanting to do it, and can be hard to watch because you're like, but I still want to do it, and you question if you should be doing it, but you also like, what else would I do? I love doing this. So yeah, and I think I just maybe wish I'd got to this side of the job sooner than I did, but I don't think I would have got here without also doing all the things I took to do this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're right where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
What's your superpower?
I think my superpower is my people skills. I think I have good people skills. Someone out there is probably listening to this and saying, no, you don't. but I think
this is my superpower. It's like, no, you do not have. Like,
yeah, exactly.
There's always going to be someone.
Like, sorry to that person. Maybe I had a bad day. I don't know. Look, I'm not perfect, but I think I have good social skills, and I do really believe that's how I've gotten to where I've gotten, because most of my jobs, even though I've applied for something, it's been an ability to connect with whoever I've met with over there, or like use other connections that I've made, genuine connections where people are willing to vouch for me. And so that's, I guess I feel like that's my superpower.
It definitely is. Everyone that I know that knows you love Deb. Deb's great. No, 100%. What are you watching, and where are you watching it?
Well, I am a proud AMC Stubbs A-lister, so that is a really cool thing to be in LA. So you can see 3 movies a week. TV-wise, we are watching The Boys. We're on the 4th season of The Boys. We're not finished yet, but that show is incredible. Highly recommend. So we watch that at home on Amazon Prime. We love The Bear, which is also a very well-known show on FX. FX.
So good.
We really love what FX puts out. We think they make incredible shows. They have incredible taste. Movie-wise, we just saw Alien Romulus, which was terrifying, but great. We're going to see Blink twice, which I, had a part on, a little bit of a part.
Yep.
Very excited to see that come out. Oh, you know what I really loved? And I know people don't agree with me, but I loved Trap. Thought Trap was so fun. I'm a big M. Night fan. I'm also enjoying, I've been saying how there's like, to me, there's like this weird millennial resurgence of like Josh Hartnett was in that movie. Channing Tatum's now in a movie. Do you know what I mean? Like there's these like stars that like, I was like, man, when I was like, these are the people that people had on their posters from like Dolly magazine.
Oh yeah, I remember Josh Hartnett in Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's back is making my life.
Oh, it's great. I don't think I even had that big of a crush on him back when in like the 2000s.
Oh, I did.
And now I think I do. He's so great.
He's amazing.
He's really great, and he's had a really cool career. So I thoroughly enjoyed that film.
Love it. What's one bit of advice that will actually help our listeners move their career forward?
I would say that the best advice that anyone ever gave me, there's 2 things I'll say that I've heard over the years. One is that if you are a writer or a director or you want to produce, whatever it is, you have to actually go and do it. You have to think of it like a sport, and you have to train, because it's a muscle. It's acting the same thing. It's like you need a coach, if you need to go to a class, or you just need to be doing it. It's the same way if you're doing a sport and you don't do it for like weeks or months or years. Like you have muscle memory, but you kind of lose that ability to do it as well. So that is something I recommend. It's like try not to take breaks, or like try to get yourself into a rhythm to keep doing it. The second thing I always say, which feels like it should be common sense, but you know what they say about common sense. Someone told it to me and I've never forgotten it. And I fully think this is how I've been able to navigate as far as I have, is that you should really just try to be as nice and as helpful to everyone that you can as possible. Obviously within reason. We all know that that's not always the case, but like
Have healthy boundaries.
Have healthy boundaries, correct. But if you can be helpful to someone in some way, if there's anything this industry is about, it's does that, because you just don't know who that person might end up being, where they might end up working. It can be hard, especially when you're trying to like build your career. If you're an assistant, if you're just building your way up, like it's really hard. If you're as pleasant to be around and as helpful as you can be within reason and with boundaries, I promise you that that kind of thing really goes a long way, because you'll be surprised about who might be able to help you with a reference or a connection. And it sounds so gross, but I mean that in the best way possible. Like, you should try to be like that amongst being able to like network. Networking is super important, because it's so gross, but it is who you know. You have to be willing to put in the work to network, even if it's really hard. And trust me, I'm like, sometimes I'm just like, I just want to be at home. I don't want to do anything, but you have to try and meet as many people as you can, because that's the best way to get exposure.
Something that comes up when you talk about networking, there are a lot of creatives who are introverts, and networking for them does not come as easily.
Yeah.
But it's figuring out, even if it's just a small amount of capacity for networking, allocate a certain amount of your energy and time to networking, and know that that's when you're going to need to be on. And it's, figure out what works for you.
Yeah. I think it's fun to figure out a way to connect with people that doesn't always have to be about your work. Like, let that come naturally or second. I just know that, like, if I meet a creative or another producer or something, I'm so much more excited when we can talk about, like, the movie we loved, or the sport that we like, or the activity that we do, or we don't even have to have it in common, but it's just so super cool to hear about, like, people's different things. Let real relationships guide you, as opposed to always thinking about it as being networking, because at the same time, it's like, this is how you're going to end up working with people that you want to work with, because you really need to try and get to know them in a way.
You want to form actual relationships
with
people.
Right. And even like, I mean, obviously there's doesn't work the way for every exec, but I feel like I've just watched so many general meetings that people have had, and it's like, people remember you if they've had a fun conversation with you.
Yeah.
And then they're like, cool, now I want to see your work.
Good advice.
Thank you.
Thank you to Deb for a fabulous interview. What a gem.
What a gem. That's all we have time for, but we want to hear from you. Let us know who or what you want to hear on the podcast. Follow us on socials at cut.pod and slide on into our DMs.
Thank you so much for stuffing us in your ears. We can't wait to dig into more in our next episode, where we talk to the gorgeous Jeannie Jo, a visual artist and writer-director from LA. If you liked what you heard in this episode, subscribe to get all our fantastic content wherever you get your podcasts, and let your friends know. Bye. Let them know.
Let them all know. Bye.
Cut is an Undertow content podcast. Your hosts are Amanda Brown and Nell Nacken. Music composed by Genevieve Patrick, produced by Meg Hipwell and Ali Aitken. This episode wouldn't have been possible without our friends at SUP. SUP High Performance Gummies. Less mixing, more time lifting with SUP's creatine, pre-workout and BCAA gummies.